I'd like to call to order the Eastern Calumet Common Council special meeting on Monday, May 18th at 6 p.m. For hearing on ordinance 20-006, Councilman Terry Hill, an ordinance reclassifying certain lands in the city of East Chicago for zoning purposes and amending ordinance number 2752 and Title 17 of East Chicago Municipal Code, the zoning ordinance, and all maps, amendments, and additions thereto, and repealing all other ordinance in conflict with therewith, rezoning the former West Calumet East Chicago housing site in Woodland Park. I'd like to everybody stand up for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call.
First District Councilwoman Monica Gonzalez.
Present.
Second District Councilman Lenny Francisci.
Present.
Third District Councilman Terrence Hill.
Present.
Fourth District Councilwoman Stacy Winfield. Sixth District Councilwoman Gilda Orange. Councilman at Large Dwayne Rancifer. Councilman at Large Emiliano Perez.
Present.
Councilman at Large Kenneth Monroe.
He said present.
Council President Robert Garcia.
Present. Let the record reflect that I had Ms. Winfield call me. She had a prior engagement. When you said Miss Orange, she is on. I seen her on. So, Yoda, are you out there still? I know I seen her on, so apparently she might be off. Do we have somebody here to speak on this ordinance?
Yes. Good evening, everyone. My name is Milton Reed. For those of you who don't know me, I am here today to, along with the developer representation, and he'll be coming up shortly. We're trying to do our best to social distance. So as he comes up, I will offer some comments from the side. And we do have a prepared presentation because we heard loud and clear in the last meeting that this was our purpose and goal is twofold. Is to want to make sure that all the council members are informed and updated on the project and the processes around it, and as well as an opportunity. The other thing we heard is the opportunity to demonstrate that the residents that actually live in the district have had an opportunity to hear and understand and ask questions. And to that extent, over the last week, there has been a very diligent effort to reach out to the residents, even in this era, by phone and by dropping packages in mailboxes, and to have petitions, which Councilman of the 3rd District has been instrumental in that process as well, and also to garner and follow up with the support that we have already demonstrated, but we will further demonstrate from the Ministerial Alliance and some of the pastors that are in the footprint. So with those two things in mind, we would like to show our success over this past several days and as a collective as to what that has done. So I will try to go through this presentation as we will try to go through it as quickly as possible, but we can be informal and interrupt with questions right then and there. And then as an additional measure, which we will have for our board packets prior to the next city council meeting, we have some just generally frequently asked questions. As you can imagine, some of the questions, and we've had good questions, and some of the questions I asked, again, and I think to just put that out, we do have that document that we will share, and it will be available for your packets, and we will answer all of those throughout this presentation as well. So with that being said, Steve, if you can bring up the presentation. And with your permission, Mr. President, I'll just go ahead and get started.
Yeah, continue, please.
Okay, and so again, this presentation is titled Rebuilding Calumet. And in Rebuilding Calumet, we understand that there are multiple factions to Rebuilding Calumet. And so I will briefly touch bases on all of the pillars of that, but the nuts and bolts of the presentation will be from Steve Riddell and Industrial Development Advantage, who we coin as IDA. And again, any questions, please just bring them on. Next slide, please. Okay, and so this is just your basic, and again, Steve will speak to this. I'm going to just go through my part and then get out of the way. But this is an experienced developer, and they will tell you more about how they specialize in twofold, not only the environmental remediation, but the redevelopment of the project, so it all happens simultaneously. We don't want to remediate, then it sit, and then have to find a developer. There are advantages in multiple areas to do it simultaneously. Next slide, please. And again, I will let Steve will speak to their integrity. When going through this presentation, they felt that sometimes you just have to say what you stand for and who you are, and you have to prove it through demonstrated activity, but sometimes to establish that base, and this is what this slide speaks to about the integrity and the way that the philosophy of the developers. Again, I'm being very brief here because Steve will speak to this for himself. Okay, so basically in Project Phoenix, there are 4 pillars that we understand are very important in the overall conversation. Over the last few months, I have not had one conversation where one or more of these pillars, and just about all of them, come up. Healthy environment, home ownership, economic opportunity, and community empowerment. Steve. So, as we know, this all starts with the healthy environment. And there's nothing that can be done, nothing that can be agreeable that has a negative impact on human health and environment. And rightfully so, that everyone is concerned. And certainly we have gone through, the city of East Chicago has had its challenges, but the plans that are being put forth, and I want to say this to be clear and for all, that this will not have a negative impact on human health and environment. And it again will be demonstrated further as we go through this. But that was at the forefront of every conversation, of every plan, of everything that's going forward. And also on top of that, though, you know, creating a generational opportunity with new expectations. You know, it's time for Calumet to have its turn in going to the next level. And that it may mean different things to different people, but we certainly think that this is a good role, especially when you look at alternatives and options that can be in that footprint. And I think it's just noteworthy to say that the role of the developer is as far as the remediation, they are the fix for the remediation. They are the ones that are going to take the responsibility to clean this up to a high standard. And so everyone that has been worried about the things that we've had to deal with, they will take that responsibility. Next slide, please. So again, very, very briefly, just so you know that there is an answer for home ownership and affordable housing. If we look right now, the city of East Chicago owns over 200 lots in Zone 2. And as we understand, the potential of those 200 lots is over 100 new housing units. Steve? And so if you take the new units, you have the home ownership program, which will subsidize the housing costs. We realize that it would be very difficult for people to come out and buy $180,000, $200,000 homes. And so we know there have to be programs, and these programs are put in place not only to help somebody to make it affordable to take a mortgage, but also for the stability of the neighborhood. So we need residents that are going to be here for the long haul, not transitional, and these programs are in place and will be improving as the city has done throughout other parts of the city. But one thing that's very important in home ownership, we fully understand that not everyone is ready day one even to make that move. So some of the grassroots things that we will see, such as credit repair classes, so someone today can start being ready to be a homeowner, not now, but 2 years from now. And when we further know in our city, We have units right now in our city that the rent is higher than mortgages. And so we've got to help with the mentality that if you are a renter today, you can be an owner. And this goes right along with local contractor opportunities. We know that we have contractors from the city of East Chicago, roots in the city of East Chicago, that have grown very sophisticated in their construction capabilities. We see and we know about who they are. Those of us that are from here, we see what they're doing to houses. We see how they're redoing facades. We see their brickwork. We see their interior renovation of houses. And so now's the time that the city has the ability to include these contractors, and as well as our facade grant program. The city has committed to using the facade grant program, very robust in Zone 3, and just a block by block, and very similar to what you have seen in Sunnyside. I mean, that grant program has transformed their neighborhood. And it looks really good. And again, just think of everyone with new fence lines and new windows. And because the neighborhood is stable, but the upgrade and the arm up is all a part of rebuilding Calumet. And so, again, I'm just touching bases on this very briefly. So now I'm going to turn this portion of the presentation of economic opportunity over to Steve Radell, and I will just kind of somewhat chime in from the side. But again, thank you for having us today, and I'll be in and out from the side here. Steve, can you start speaking to this slide?
Thanks, Milton. Thank you, everybody, for the opportunity to present to you. We're nothing but open. And I think we always said, and we said it to a number of council members that we've talked to, is we only want to be in a community that wants us, because the only way you have a successful endeavor like this is if you're working together and everybody benefits. We'll get back more into IDA a little bit, but what we're looking to do on this Zone 1 property is build a Class A state-of-the-art distribution facility. Logistics distribution type facility. We're targeting a $75 million investment. It could go up, could go down a little bit, depending on ultimately the size of building that we put in. But we're thinking 600,000 to an 800,000 square foot building will generate 400 to 900 long-term, full-time, really good jobs. And the reason there's a range is it's really ultimately dependent on the end user, the type of user that operates in that facility. For example, a fulfillment center will have two to 2.25 people for every 1,000 square foot of building, and a lesser type operation will have less than one worker per 1,000 square feet of building. So you can get that range. It gets, it's dependent on the user. But the jobs are, anything from the floor work that's working with the robotics on the floor to, the distribution, to logistics support, computer support, management support, and everything in between. So good full-time, full-paying jobs. As with any investment like this, anytime you have a significant economic investment, there's always a multiplier effect, and we would anticipate that same type of activity at this location.
If I can chime in, I think this is relevant to understand that these are new job creations. In the city, we've had the scenario where a company in Chicago was shutting down in Illinois and moving over here and bringing most of their employees. Well, because of the expansion in this market, these are new jobs, and the potential tenants and the Amazons or the Kias of the world, they are not shutting down and moving. They need more capacity, and so these are new jobs. And again, like was stated, from forklift driver to pick and pack, dispatch, these are the type of things that are coming to the area.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, we're talking expansion. We're talking growth in this sector of the industry, significant growth. It's only going to increase because of what we're all experiencing right now. So, as Milton said, these are new jobs. These aren't transferred or relocated positions.
And I'll further jump in. One of the frequently asked questions, and I want to put this out there for sure, is what type of consideration for the opportunities will be given to Zone 1, former Zone 1 and Zone 2 and 3 residents? And the answer is very clear by the provider. You know, we will have access to all opportunities that are presented by the development, whether it be in any phase of it, and also it will be an aggressive public outreach program so that every step of the way, we don't have to wonder and find in the fine print some announcement of the job openings or the training programs, things like that. We will be right here along with the councilman and the rest of the council to let people know we are open for business, and this is how you get started in this process, and down to hand holding even when necessary.
Yeah, that's exactly right, and we've said it to a number of folks, and we mean it. You know, part of the success, or really the key to success of a facility like this, is having a workforce that the Amazons and the IKEAs and those types of Class A distribution entities can rely on to work in their facilities. And you can have the best location, but if there's not a strong workforce to draw from, those entities will relocate or put their new facilities somewhere further away because they want that labor pool. So a very important part of what we're going to be doing here is working with experts in the area to ensure that we have a trained workforce. And as I said, I mean, that's as critical as our $75 million investment. So that's not marketing talk. That's self-interest talk. We really have a self-interest to make sure that we are part of and a catalyst for helping strengthen the employee market, the labor pool in this area, and that obviously includes the neighbors and the locale.
And I will say also, just to put a finer point on it, $75 million, those are real dollars investments. And certainly for the city of East Chicago, it is not every day that we get this type of investment into the neighborhood. And we know that this increases property values, and it spurs other things that have just the benefits. And, you know, whether it's someone entrepreneurial that is thinking down to someone entrepreneurial thinking food truck, on up to being a direct supplier to whatever it may be, there will be plenty of opportunity when this type of thing comes to the area.
So this is a concept, you know, it's not the pretty artist rendering yet. You know, we have engaged some preliminary engineering. Obviously, we'll do a lot more if we're lucky enough to get through this process and have the site rezoned. But we have done preliminary engineering. That's kind of probably the largest building we could put on this lot to make it you know, market to meet the needs of the market. And that's roughly 840,000 square foot building. But you know, part of our agreement with the city, specifically the city entity housing authority that owns the property, is to acquire the site for $2.1 million. We have a purchase agreement right now with the city that's conditioned upon a number of things before we would execute that agreement. We have put money up. 5% of the purchase price we did put down in escrow, but you know, we have a number of conditions that have to be met before we will close on the property. First one, obviously, is getting the property rezoned. But again, we're excited to work with everybody in council and planning to hopefully get that done. So just to put a finer point on this, this is a concept. In this business, you might do dozens of these concepts with as you're targeting different users, et cetera, that would ultimately locate on this site.
Two things I'd like to point out on this slide is that if you look at the left-hand side of the slide, you see 3 entryways off of 151st. If you look down along the McCook Avenue where it says land purchase price, there's no access to the property. And so there will be no traffic coming through the neighborhood for this particular development. And if you see, and some of you remember when Union Tank was there across the canal, you know, they had hundreds of employees, and, you know, shift change. We're in industrial city, shift change, you would see some activity, but nothing that was disturbing anyone's day or rest or anything like that. And so I want to make sure that everyone in the neighborhood and the residents all know that the traffic will not be coming through the community. The next thing that I think is very, very important, and I've personally done economic development. I've been in this for a while. I've taken it upon myself to look at brownfield and contaminated sites, and I have not seen a case where a developer offers $2.1 million for a contaminated site that is listed as a superfund. This technically has negative real estate value because of the contamination. Let's just face it. And so to offer $2.1 million, what you normally see is the city or municipality is asked to give it to the developer, or a nominal fee of, like, say, maybe $100,000 or something like that. But this $2.1 million is very, very, it shows, for lack of a better term and lack of formality, it shows skin in the game. And I want to further state that, it has been stated to us on multiple occasions by the city administration that this $2.1 million will go, the developer, I want to be clear, the developer is paying us for the land, okay? But to the housing authority and city, and the city is saying that they will use this funds to combine with additional funds to make a total of $3.5 million for homes, in new construction homes in Zone 2. Now, you can do about 20 homes ready to go right now, day one, as soon as this transaction takes place. And I think that's pretty impressive as far as commitment and the first phase to the answer for home ownership, because you have a funding plan in place. That's the thing with the homes, someone has to pay for it. So I just wanted to point out those 2 points.
So, Steve, go back to that last slide, please, if you would. So just picture that, we have a building. These are sophisticated buildings. They look better than a tan block like that. But, you're talking concrete slab and you're talking asphalt pavement, all designed to spec. And so IDA, which we'll talk about it in a minute, our focus is really on repositioning and redeveloping sites with real or perceived environmental issues. And in many cases, this type of a use, where you're having essentially concrete and asphalt as your ultimate cap on the site to support development, concrete in the form of buildings, asphalt in the form of parking and roadways, et cetera, is called an engineered control in the EPA parlance. But in almost every instance, that's one of the better uses you can do on a site that has subsurface issues. No matter how many feet you dig up 1, you dig up 2, you dig up 3, you still have contamination at depth. So this type of a development really fits well with sites like this, where you don't have to worry about a bunch of individual users and following their institutional controls, which will be put on this site. Those are deed restrictions. You can't dig down to 3 feet. You can't plant tomatoes, things like that. And in this case, it'll be a non-residential deed restriction. You can't use the groundwater. Nobody's using it anyway. But there will also be the engineered control aspect to it, to any remedy that's selected here under the EPA's rod. But here you have the best one of all. You have a really significant concrete slab with a $75 million investment around it in the form of the building and the pavement. So I just wanted to make that point as we go to the next slide. So IDA, Brett Hickman and I started this company several years ago. He and I each have 30 plus years of experience in the environmental industry. Most recently, before we formed IDA, we were the principals on a significant project in New York City that kind of led to us forming IDA. So we had control over our destiny more than we did on that one. Right now, we have a team working outside of New York City where we've taken an old, this was an old, pretty much fallow development site that needed to have the grade raised for warehouse distribution development. So our team is working on this site, and we put together a plan to bring in fill that meets state criteria, clean fill, and we have a team of engineers, and we have operators, and we own our own equipment, and we're bringing the grade up so that it will support, in this picture, it'll support a 1 million square foot building, and then there's another 500,000 feet of buildings that will be built. But we're presently working on that site. You can go to the next slide, Steve. We're bringing 85% of the material in by water. as you can imagine, just because of New York City type traffic. And we did a partnership with the Marine Group. They own the barges, they own the unloader. Everything else is ours on site. So we own the yellow iron. That's our yellow iron. That's a real logo, and that's real people inside with IDA that are moving that material to grade. And then we blade it and compact it to meet engineered standards, and we put it in lifts. Last thing you want when you put your building up is that it's unstable. So all that plays together. We have engineers that control that, and our operators place the material. So wanted to give you an example of we're not just folks that are on the management side. We have yellow iron and boots on the ground, and actively working projects in the area. Good. So this is an example of that Staten Island site that I mentioned, where Brett and I came in as the principals of this entity, and this is kind of post filling phase. This was a site nobody wanted to be on. This was a site that needed a lot of agreements, and our team got those agreements in place. We brought in 5 million yards of material that met state standards, and we got the site to a position to be to go vertical with buildings. This was the first pad site. Ultimately, a 975,000 square foot building went in here. But as we were doing all the work, this is 2 years into the project. This project took 3 years before we had building pads and went vertical, just because of the insurmountable hurdles that we had. 5+ million yards of material. We had a lot of issues to work through with the regulator. We did them all above board. That's the only way we do anything. But it was a challenging regulatory environment, and we met it with flying colors. And it was things that we had to work together with the regulators. And we even told the regulators, we're going to work with you to make this a process that you're going to like, and we're going to do the work for you as far as regulating the work that we're going to be doing on our site. And we held true to those commitments. But the point I wanted to make is, at the beginning of this whole process, no users wanted to come to this area. Couldn't be done. Nobody wants to be here. You can go to the next slide, Steve. Well, that changed. The minute the first building went up, everybody wanted to be here. There's 4 buildings on the site now, 3, and the 4th one's going up right now. That's a building that IKEA's in. Amazon took another building. They leased out another smaller building and made, I don't know who will take the 3rd building, but you got about 4.5 million square feet of buildings built there for distribution, and you probably have about over 4,000 jobs generated by that.
And can you explain how it's above grade a little bit?
So we had to bring in some areas 20 feet of fill, and you just don't dump it. You have to bring it in lifts, place it compacted, and we even had geotech engineers certifying every lift. It's pretty stringent permitting in the city. So yeah, we had to bring up the grade so that you don't want to build a building in an area that's going to flood. This was an old tank farm, a major oil storage facility. There's some of them in the area here, very similar. And in this case, it was kind of built like a bathtub, where if a tank would leak, the tank contents would be contained. So it needed to come up to begin with, but there was also the environmental aspect of potential contamination from the oil storage facility in the ground. So we came in, bought the site, took it over, and then put the final remedy in, which was the cap. And the cap happened to be in the form of 15+ feet of fill in a building, but it's about as significant of an engineer control as you could do. But that capped the site and made it usable for this type of development and use. You can keep going. That's the building across the street. That's a real picture of the facade. That's about an 860,000 square foot Amazon fulfillment center. So that's that's 860,000 square feet. They have peak time. They have 2,300 workers in that facility.
And I just want to point out, it may not be Amazon, but this is a good idea of what the facade of the building will look like that is coming, hopefully, to our neighborhood. Go ahead.
Well, I'll speak to the training part, and then Milton, you can jump in. But as we said, a critical part of what we're going to be doing is making sure that when the users, when we start marketing this site, and our plan would be once we start with implementing the remediation activities, then folks can see activity on a site. That's usually when you start getting real estate brokers' attention and users' attention. Not when nothing's going on, but when you can see activity, and then we can show them the vision. But just as important as that is making sure we have a workforce that these folks want to know that they have to depend upon. And so training is going to be an important prong of what we're going to be doing. We're going to work with the city, the ministers, every stakeholder we can and experts in the region here that have their own facilities. We're not going to invent the wheel. We're going to take the wheels that are out there and the partners that we're going to have that are in the community to make sure that we are reaching as many people in the community as we can to solidify a training center that and center, quote unquote, that can take different forms, but the ultimate is we want to make sure that we have a workforce that's trained that could benefit our facility and others in the area. So,
and that's one thing. If I'll jump in here to say that there is a mutual benefit to the training. The prospective tenants, they want to see a workforce, and can you give that example about where the location is as relates to exits on
Sure.
the highway?
Yeah, I think I alluded to it before, but I'll be more clear this time. So as Brett and I get older and work more in the industry, we find that everybody used to always think real estate is still about location, but for distribution, it always was, the thinking always was, you got to be at the exit, the closest exit to the highway, so we can get to the highway and get to the area with the people that want the goods, right? So that's important. Obviously, you got to be able to get the goods to the people that are ordering them. But equally as important, if not more, is the labor force. And some of the bigger players in the industry will not locate at that great location because it has great ingress, egress to the highway. They'll go further away to get to that labor force. You draw that, they typically draw a 25-mile radius and then look for the metrics that are out there on all the databases and take a look at what the workforce looks like. And we want to make sure when that is drawn that we're at the epicenter of a hot labor force.
And I'll just speak to two things again very quickly. Appreciate everyone's patience. We only have a couple more slides. I want to explain what this holistic approach means. And I mentioned it maybe once or twice, but we realize that everyone in our community is not at the same level. And there may have to be some different type of hand holding to make sure. And it could be to the extent of, okay, this person has a resume. This person does not have a resume. This person needs a shirt to wear to the interview. This person may need help making sure they get to the interview. We know that in the past, when some of these trainings and apprenticeship programs have been out in Chesterton and South County, it has been difficult to get out there for some of our residents on a sustained basis. But we feel having it right in East Chicago is taking away any reason that someone that is looking for opportunity within our own community, and that's the empowerment that we're talking about, is having this for ourselves in our own neighborhood and reaching out to all levels holistically as we are at different levels of growth and maturity. I remember even myself, there was a time someone had to help me with a resume, and we can't forget that there are other people that may be in that exact same situation and can be as good employees and carry on with very great careers right here in East Chicago. Lastly, I will say that when it says synergistic alliance partners, this takes a village type mentality for all of us to get on board, rally behind, and make something positive happen in Calumet. Calumet has had some needs and has some challenges, and we've been around, and you've seen the demolition there, you've seen the emptiness there, but now it's time to rise as this phoenix that we have referenced, and you've seen it in articles, to really revitalize and rebuild Calumet. This is what this is all about. So we won't, the facts, if I may, they go into, many different, there are more than just three, but the three that we always hear, no matter what conversation we in, and I think we addressed them in this presentation, but why don't we just run through these very quickly? We've already addressed them, but.
Why don't you ask the question and I'll
Okay.
answer.
Will the development have a negative impact on human health or environment?
Well, the answer is no. Obviously, we have to work with the EPA to make sure that the remediation development that we implement will have no negative impacts to human health and environment. And frankly, the way we're going to do it and the way you need to do these types of projects is you integrate remedial requirements with development requirements so you get that development that is safe for the community and the environment. So.
And to hear it from the developer, will consideration be given to zone 2 and 3 residents, and I'll add former zone 1 residents for training and jobs?
Yeah, like we said, absolutely. We love nothing more than to have all of them trained for our facility and many others in the area.
Excuse me, one question.
Yes.
Now, the training I get for Calumet, but this is for the whole city, correct? Not just Calumet?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, these will be, the workforce will be trained. They can, wherever they can get the best job, we support that. So
let us be very clear, and I appreciate that question. This is opportunity and benefit for the entire city of East Chicago. I mean, every district and everyone has had great questions on the city council. Everyone will benefit from this opportunity. That's the magnitude and size of it.
Okay. The slide didn't say it, so.
Well, I appreciate you pointing that out. We've had so many of these conversations, we may miss a fine point, but that's why I wanted you to jump in. But let that be clear. Every district, and just as every council person has input in this, their districts will also benefit from the opportunity, and they will also be a part of the communications as far as knowing what's going on, and we will have that ongoing. So number 3 question that we hear a lot is, and again, we'll have a full list of about 10 or 15 questions, maybe 11 questions if I recall correctly. Will there be a negative impact on property value?
Yeah, so I think an important point to emphasize, I don't like reading scripts, apologize to everybody, but important point to emphasize is that right now the site is a Superfund site. It's a listed Superfund site. That's one of the risks that as a developer, we obviously can't have a listed Superfund site as our ultimate developed site. So we're going to work with the EPA to delist the site. That means take it off the Superfund designation so that we can attract users that aren't worried about stigma like that. We're going to take care of that. We're going to remediate the site to meet human health requirements for the use and for the community at large. So, when we're done, it's going to be a positive, not a negative. And our experience is that can only do one thing to the surrounding area is increase property values. We think it's a positive, not a negative.
And I will include, as a part of the fact, there is a more detailed answer to that, and it deals with the Lake County tax assessors records and how they demonstrated things that we have seen in zones 2 and 3. And so all of that, it will be public information, and we can speak to that. But again, it's a little bit of a longer explanation to that question. But for all those that have interest in this question, we will have that fully available, as I mentioned, with the full sheet of frequently asked questions. Okay, so again, I think just as a wrap up, we definitely understand that trust has to be demonstrated, and it takes a true partnership and teamwork.
Yeah, I'd like to close with something as well. Thank you all again for the opportunity to talk with you. Under better circumstances, we would have loved to have met in person with all of you. That was our plan. In fact, when we were last out here, it was March 12 and 13, and right after that, things kind of unraveled for the world. So we're not complaining about that. We're hoping everybody's safe out there. But I do want to say one thing. We're not looking at this as a building on a Zone 1 piece of property. We're excited that this can be a catalyst to help rebuild the area. So, Brett and I and our IDA team are looking at this as a big picture opportunity to do top-notch, state-of-the-art. I mean, we're not shooting satellites here, but a top-notch, top-of-the-line remediation development with a Class A building. But really, it's more than that. It's a catalyst for the community, and we're very excited to hopefully be a part of that, and we'd be proud to work within your community to do that. So.
And so we say thank you for this part of the presentation in the room. And I'm not sure how far into the room the camera goes, but we have the Executive Director of Housing and her representative. And I believe, Mr. President, they're asking if they can come forward and offer just a few brief comments.
Yes, go ahead, man. They can come
Thank
up.
you.
Good evening, Council.
Good evening.
Tia Cawley, just want to come back and answer any questions you all have regarding Zone 1. I would like to also remind you that in West Calumet, that we will not build anything else in Zone 1. East Chicago Housing Authority, as well as HUD, has said that there will not be any more housing put in Zone 1. Due to the contamination and how we had to go there and remove the people, as well as tear down the properties in Zone 1. Those properties in West Calumet was already paid for and already there. So it would be senseless for us to go back now and inherit a bill and have to have the liability. In 2016 council, we received a shock that we had to get the people out of there and we had to move forward. It was a nightmare. We had to move very quickly, and it was very unsafe and healthy as far as the housing authority. So with the city's help, we were able to get the people out of there, as well as HUD, removing the people, giving the people vouchers. Every resident in West Calumet received a voucher. That's something that people would love to have, a housing authority Section 8 voucher. They were able to go to any state that accepted Section 8. They received their security deposit back. They received a new security deposit to move forward, as well as for them to be able to relocate. They went to several churches asking them for assistance, telling the residents that they had not received any help, which was not true, and we do have the backup if the council needs to see it. We did everything we could, as well as with HUD. We had fair housing on the grounds, things of that nature, just to get the residents safe and sound. Attorney Harris Law Firm, who was Housing Authority's attorney, made sure that we did everything that we had to do to make sure that we were doing things correctly. That was something that had never happened to our housing authority, as well as when I go to trainings and conferences, they had never seen a housing authority get families out of there so quickly. We know that it caused heartache and pain, but what you have to realize, council people, that the heartache and pain is on zone 2 and 3, because those are homeowners. Though the people in zone 1, they rented from the housing authority. They received and benefited a great deal from the housing authority, something that they were entitled to, because we did not know the contamination that was in zone 1. But zone 2 and 3 are the residents that live there now, and most of them are homeowners, and they're the ones that deserve peacefulness. In zone 1, we know that we had a lot of problems. I went with Chief Becker and signed the first contract for spot shooting. That's because we had so many problems between there and Guthrie, which was quite a bit of housing. You don't have the gang banging. You don't have the traffic. So zone 2 and 3 are actually having a little bit more peace versus with the housing authority being gone. Did it harm and hurt housing authority? Absolutely. We lost a lot of funds, and we lost a lot of good residents. I mean, we had some that was not so good, but believe me, we did deal with that as well. We got rid of them and put them out, but sometimes that took time. But I'm asking that the council please consider and value the importance of zone 2 and 3 by thinking about the community, not just about zone 1. That's housing authority's property, and we can't even sell the property without HUD's permission. So we have worked with HUD and as far as the housing authority board, try to make things better for the people in the city of East Chicago. Is there any questions, Mr. President?
Yeah, does any fellow council people got any questions? Ms. Gonzalez, you have any questions?
No, I don't.
All right. Mr. Francisco, you got any questions for Ms. Cawley?
No, I do not, Mr. President.
Mr. Hill, you have any questions for Ms. Cawley?
No, Mr. President.
Ms. Orange, do you have any questions for Ms. Cowley?
No, she answered the questions that I needed about
Okay.
if they were going to try to put the houses up back.
All right. Mr. Rassifer, you have any questions for Ms. Cowley?
No, I do not have any questions.
Okay. Mr. Perez, you have any questions for Ms. Cowley?
No questions at this time. Thank you.
Mr. Monroe, you have any questions?
No, thank you, Chief.
Yeah, I just got one question because I keep on hearing that 2.1 million is going to be going towards housing. Is housing going to be involved in this?
Mr. President, we will be involved. Some of the things that was brought to the Housing Authority, as well as our non-for-profit Metro. What we're planning to do is work as far as giving some of the funds to build properties, and then we'll sell them and recycle it like that and make the money work to try to help the community and area. Like I explained to you all at the last meeting, we're in the process of purchasing Cardinal Terrace and North Harbor in the next probably 3 weeks. So we're not getting out of the business of trying to help the community. But Zone 1 is not the answer to help the community.
Correct. I just want to make sure that we got the understanding because in the presentation, the developer is not going to be doing any housing, correct?
The developer?
Yeah, because he mentioned that in his briefing.
I don't know exactly what the developer's plan is. I just know what the mayor's plan is, and he's asked me to work with him. You look at Washington Square, Housing Authority turned around and put 2 of the homes up, and what we did was we used our funds to match, and then once we sold it, we were able to get what we needed back.
Okay. Ms. Cowley, is that 2.1, is that going to be in writing that's going to go for housing in Zone 2 and 3?
In Zone 1, it won't go all to Zone 2 and 3. That has to go with HUD's approval. What we will do is rotate the money and put it inside, because you got to see how the houses are going to sell, number one. Sure. I mean, you know, sometimes they sat in Washington Square for a great deal of time. When you're using federal money, you have to have certain income guidelines, things of that nature, and we have to get approval for the way we spend the money.
Anybody have any questions for Ms. Cowley? Thank you, Ms. Cowley. I appreciate your coming to the meeting.
Thank you.
Mr. President, if I may, Carla Morgan is in the room as well. I don't think she's had the benefit of being able to be seen on the Zoom, and she has a few comments that she would like to offer. Well,
but before that, I want to go, in case my councilman has any questions, I like to go with them if they have any questions for the developer. So I'll hear her comments afterwards.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Here. Ms. Gonzalez, you have any questions for the developer?
No, I don't have a question. I just have a comment. One of the things that they failed, well, not failed, but they forgot to mention was that once they develop this project, they're staying on board. They're not going to build and go away. And I just want to make that clear. Milton, can you elaborate on that just a little bit?
Yes, and I believe that Steve can even do better than I can, and it's a part of their business model, and that's
if I may, and thank you for the opportunity. That's just how we operate. So I assume everybody knows it, but you don't. So thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, we're not a build and flipper. We would build and hold, and you know, the tenants and users do long-term leases, so we would hold throughout the period. So thank you.
Is anything else, Ms. Gonzalez?
No, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Francisci, any questions for the developers?
No, I do not.
All right. Mr. Hill, any questions for the developers?
No, sir, Mr. President.
Ms. Orange, any questions?
No, I talked to them about 40 minutes on Friday, and they answered all my questions.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Ransford?
No questions.
Mr. Perez?
No, I also spoke with them for about an hour and a half, and they answered all of mine. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Mr. Monroe?
No, Mr. President.
All right. I just had a few questions because it just surprised me that I know the developer is going to be doing the cleanup, and I know this is new to all of us. And what is Milton? Did you get hold of the EPA?
I was not able to get a response from the EPA, and maybe Carla can speak to that a little bit better. I know I tried, but we only had that one day in there. So,
How about I seen IDEM on the meeting here? Is somebody from IDEM on?
I think I saw Michael Spinyar. I'm not sure if he's still there or not. Steve, if you have a question for him, Steve will have to, his name is Michael Spinyar.
I seen it earlier.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. My question is because my conversation, I don't know if it was Thursday or Friday.
It was Friday.
It was Friday.
Yes, sir.
And mine is that what EPA's role in this here. I like to have something in writing. We have to do our due diligence in this here. We want to put Calumet in the same position again down the road. But I like to hear from the EPA item to see what their responsibility is to oversee this company doing this cleanup.
So, I mean, I can jump in, Steve, here with IDA. We can't do anything without their approval. So this isn't a self-perform situation. If we're able to get through the process, acquire the site, then the next steps are we finalize our takeover of the responsibilities from the responsible parties, and then we also finalize an agreement with the EPA where we work out our plans. And then from that agreement, there's a lot of different plans that have to be done to satisfy Superfund requirements. So there's a lot of engineering and environmental engineering and detail and community health and safety, worker health and safety. There's a lot of work plans and things that have to be worked through before we go implement. And then EPA typically does third-party oversight to make sure we do what we say.
And the delisting. Can you speak to the delisting? EPA has a final say-so on the cleanup.
This is heavily regulated. This is not something that, this isn't a fly-by-night operation. Heavily regulated, and we'll have to work closely with EPA to earn their trust, which is no problem. That's what we do. But it's definitely a very regulated process, even when and if we're able to take over the cleanup. Still very heavily regulated.
And the final sign-off is that the site is taken off of the Superfund list and delisted, which the EPA makes that final call. So they have a vested interest in what they do. But the EPA does have a statement on record of how they are viewing the project and the remediation.
Yeah, Steve, I want to thank you, Steve, for talking to me last week. And like I said, I need to talk to the EPA and IDEM. I'd like to hear from them. Is a great project. I'm totally on board. I want to thank Karen Longerman and Don Kalabowski. They've been in touch with me working this project. Mr. Kalabowski has been very good in getting me the information on this. But I'd like to have the jobs in writing. Also, the 2.1 million, if it's going to be done for housing in zone 2 and 3, I'd like to have it in writing also. Mr. Buscemi, if this passes Monday, do they need to come back to the council for any type of approval?
They will not. This is a zoning of the zone map, and it would convert the existing zoning of residential to M1 light industrial. And the council, if it takes final action on Monday and approves that, would allow rezoning and then allow any of the M1 light industrial uses. Actual development, detailed development, would not come to the city council. Those would be matters that would be handled by the executive branch and by, if possibly in some cases, by the plan commission.
Yeah, my only thing, like I said, is a great project. I'd like to hear from the EPA because I'd like to see what their oversight is on this cleanup here and IDEM also. So, but it's a great project, like I said.
Mr. President, thank you for those comments. If you may allow Carla to speak for a few minutes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Carla Morgan, Corporation Counsel for the city. To address some of the questions that were just answered or asked, we did ask the EPA to speak to this process, either submit a letter or show up today. In the end, we spoke a number of times since last Monday's council meeting and asked for that. In the end, they decided not to. But they also believe that the ROD kind of speaks to their position. And again, this is a revised ROD. It's a revision of the one that they developed in 2014, but was lodged in 2014 and just revised here in March, which has not been challenged by the Community Advisory Group. The other thing that the council should note is that it's not unprecedented that a private company does these kind of remediations. In fact, the remediations in zones 2 and 3 have been done by private companies overseen by the EPA. That's the norm, where the EPA engages a contractor who has to clean up according to the work plan developed by the EPA. The EPA's primary responsibility is developing that work plan, and they make sure their contractor, Parsons is a contractor who did a majority of the work in zones 2 and 3, but make sure that contractor abides by what's in that work plan, and they verify this cleaned up to the EPA standards before the EPA says, you know, okay, you've complied and the area is clean. I'm gonna try to very quickly address about 12 years of history to bring everyone up to speed on how we got to where we are in the fund zone. So I'm gonna abbreviate. I'm gonna try to read fast in order to respect y'all's time. Okay, so as you already know, the property owner and HUD have made it clear that they can't do any residential development in this area because HUD's regulations won't allow them to do residential development with any contamination present. So that ship has sailed. The owner has made a decision, even though the EPA standard allows for residential development with 2 feet of cleanup, HUD's standard is much higher. And so those two things can't be reconciled in order for there to be residential development there. So what we're faced with now is, what do we do? What does the city do in light of the fact that there can't be residential development there because there's no developer lining up to do residential development in the Superfund site, which I remind the council is the most lead contaminated site ever found in the history of the EPA. They've never, ever had a site where there was refined lead in a residential area. So the city and the CAG actually begged the EPA for years to clean up to standard for the option 4D, but in the end, the EPA's decision was to remediate to what its national standard is, which is remediation option 4B, to clean to no more than 2 feet. And that's, the EPA has to adhere to what its national standard is. They want things to be uniform. And in this case, it ignored the fact that this site had very unique characteristics and the fact that we know that there's debris, contaminated debris to a depth of 10 feet or more here. So even though we fought for years for a better cleanup standard, and the CAG did too, in the end we didn't get what we asked for. It should be noted that over the course of dozens of meetings and several public hearings that occurred from 2016 to 2019, hundreds of residents attended the various meetings held by the EPA, but few others came to learn what was happening. The Community Advisory Group, which was represented by not one, but 2 different environmental law clinics, the prestigious Northwestern University Environmental Law Clinic and University of Chicago's even more prestigious Environmental Law Clinic, attended those meetings and submitted public comments a number of times. Members of the CAG filed a motion to intervene in the USS-led Superfund lawsuit. That caused a delay in the EPA's amending its ROD, but ultimately the court decided that the CAG, like the city, had no standing to be part of the court case and thus had no way to directly influence the ultimate remediation decision directly. Some members of the CAG fought against relocation of West Calumet residents, while others decided the injustice of West Calumet residents living amid unprecedented levels of contamination was not acceptable. The CAG and its members, with the help of their legal representatives from the 2 law clinics, asked for and received additional public hearings on the EPA's proposed remediation plans. They asked for and received an extension of the time to provide public comments on the remediation plan, and they even challenged the lead service line replacement plan, which is the pattern that the CAG has exhibited over the years, which is in keeping with the letter that they submitted to the council. The CAG, through its legal representation, presented arguments that Zone 1 should be cleaned up to a much higher standard in order to protect human health. They argue that there would be no community acceptance of the lower cleanup standard of 2 feet only. There's a December 3rd, 2018 letter from the CAG which states as follows, and I quote, "Based on the questions and comments presented at the meeting, community acceptance of the preferred alternative is unlikely." That's the EPA's preferred alternative 4B. The community stated loudly that it did not like the plan because extremely high levels of arsenic and lead contamination are present in the soil at the West Calumet Housing Complex in Goodman Park. The preferred plan will leave in place contamination located below 24 inches. The preferred plan includes many institutional controls that will impede a successful redevelopment of the property, and it does not factor in the relationship between the remaining soil contamination and the groundwater contamination. That letter was signed by Maritza Lopez, Akeisha Daniels, Tara Adams, and Lori Locklear. These arguments are repeated in the same group's March 13th, 2019 letter to the EPA. The arguments are similar to the arguments the city made to the EPA and IDEM over the course of these last 4 years. Note that neither the CAG nor its law clinic took any action against the EPA when the EPA finalized its remediation decision in March 2020. Instead, the CAG now contradicts its previous stated positions, whereas they said before, they would never agree to have residential development if there was only 24 inches of remediation there. Their recent letters contradict that. Their recent letters also imply that there could be residential development there remediation. That contradicts what the CAG has said over and over again in writing. But over and over again in the past 4 years, the CAG and its members have sought to delay the process of arriving at a remedy for West Calumet. They did this with the lead service line replacement project in their April 4th, 2017 and September 15th, 2017 correspondence. They were largely successful in delaying every process with the EPA. Now the same parties who signed letters in the past stating that a residential cleanup to a maximum of 2 feet was unacceptable, they're trying the same tactic here now with rezoning, even if it means contradicting everything they previously stated in writing. The city tried to convince the EPA to clean the former West Calumet housing complex to a higher standard, but ultimately the EPA and the PRPs did not agree to that. As a result, the property owner, who is the housing authority, represented here by Ms. Cawley, cannot, per the regulations that govern them, develop the site as residential. Following these regulations in an effort to protect East Chicago residents, the housing authority has stated the site will never again be residential. I'm sorry I'm being redundant, but we just need to drive that point home. The horse is out of the barn on this being returned to residential, and I just want to make sure everyone involved understands that. And we're trying to make the best of what we have, and we do believe the IDA is the best real-world alternative that we have.
Yeah, Ms. Morgan, I think we all understand. I think we're all in agreement that Zone 1 would never be housing. So thank you for your comment.
All right, I'm wrapping up, but there's 5 criteria.
Please.
I'm trying. There's 12 years of history, and I'm condensing it down to about 3-4 minutes here. So there's criteria under the law that the CAG cites that the rezoning has to meet. When the comprehensive plan was drafted, no one knew the extent of the contamination there. They did not know that this was the most lead contaminated neighborhood ever. This neighborhood is surrounded already on 3 sides by industrial development, which we're very familiar with. So this really is in keeping with the character of the neighborhood. Property values actually in the city have risen over the time we've been dealing with the Superfund since we became aware of what was there. Property values had been hovering around $29,000 for residential property in 2010 to 2011. Now the average valuation is $90,000. So that flies in the face of what the CAG is arguing, that somehow this remediation is going to drop property values. Our property values have risen quicker than ever before in our history. And just in closing, IDA approached the Housing Authority, which I'm addressing some of the things that were brought up by the CAG in writing in the last few days. But IDA approached the Housing Authority in the city with their proposal. And just want to emphasize that if this proposal fails, we're faced with a very real possibility of having an empty 50-acre site that may never be able to be developed. So this is perhaps a once-in-a-generation opportunity. And we're going to be submitting the CAG's previous letters to the CAG previously presented to the EPA, IDEM, and so that the council has a record, and you'll see what the CAG has said in the past, which contradicts what they're saying to you now. And we just want to move forward with something that's going to be most protective of human health, but also help the local economy to develop in an area that sorely needs development. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Ms. Morgan, I just got one quick question because you mentioned property value. What part of the city that is $99,000 the property value at?
90,000, that's the overall valuation. The average valuation in the city now is 90,000. Now I've gone in and, I'm not gonna, people's personal information I'm not gonna give, but we've gone into the tax assessor's website and looked at valuations of properties that are in this immediate area, and they've gone up quite a bit over that time. So again, we could, if you want
Yeah,
greater
I'm just saying this.
information,
I
we
think
give
it's
you
kind of
that.
high there because I know nobody in Calumet can sell their house for even 30 or 40,000.
I said that's an average for the city, but at the same time in Calumet, houses have gone, the property value, the assessed valuation has gone up quite a bit. Now, there's some people who've challenged the valuation and got it lowered, but the trend is obvious, it's clear, and it's in one direction, which has been up over the course of this.
Thank you, Ms. Morgan.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. I don't think we have any more questions. I did mention in the beginning that we had several grassroots as far as petitions and signatures and letters of support, but the leader who has been a part of that is Councilman Terry Hill, as with some of the volunteers, and he will speak to that. So for our portion, outside of questions, I think we're done as far as the developer and myself.
All right, I'm just gonna go around. Councilman Gonzalez, any questions?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Francisci? Right. Mr. Hill?
No, sir.
Do you have some petitions there, like Mr. Reed said?
Yes, sir.
Can you explain to us what you got?
Yes, I have several different petitions for those individuals who reside in the Calumet area and those who are property owners within the Calumet area. And I have a lot of them. However, one of the main ones that come from the First Baptist Church of City of Chicago, and with Douglas Sloth as pastor. He put a petition out with several different members who live in the Calumet, and I have some of the other ones. And I would like to give it to the clerk so they can make copies, so each and one of those petitions signed by those who live in the Calumet, we'll have them in our packet for the next meeting on Monday.
Okay, that sounds great.
Yeah, along with Mr. Kolobowski also, and his CEO gave me a letter of support, along with some of the letters of support that came to the Planning Commission. So all of those letters will be made copies for us for Monday's meeting. Thank you.
Is that it, Mr. Hill?
Yes, sir.
All right, Ms. Orange, any comments?
Yes, I had a comment, and I want to go back to something Councilman Garcia.
Yes.
You said that they said in the beginning that houses, they were going to use the $2.1 million toward housing. I thought that $2.1 million was the purchase price of the land. I thought that they said over time they would be leveraging dollars, some of the dollars toward housing in the second and third zones, but not the $2.1 million, because $2.1 million is the housing authority's money that they've given them for that land.
Correct.
So I want that clarified, because I don't want anybody to come back and say, well, they said it's supposed to be $2.1 million, if that's not the case.
No, Miss Carly said that they will leverage some other dollars with that over time, but it's just like it's a misperception is that $2.1 million is going to be used for housing, which is not.
Well, no, I think that they said the $2.1 million was the purchase price of the land that they are purchasing from them.
Correct.
So if they, I would like for Ms. Carly or somebody to clarify that, because I don't want people going away from here thinking, well, they're going to use the $2.1 million that they got from the housing authority, because the housing authority can't do anything without HUD saying, okay, that they can use it anyway.
Correct.
So I want
Ms. Carly?
that before you get back.
Go ahead, Ms. Carly.
The $2.1 million, like I expressed to you all prior to, everything has to go before HUD. HUD allowed us to go in, and that's how we were able to do the non-for-profit and build those other homes and to receive the dollars back. And it was a rotation that we did. As we built one, they sold it. It was able to go back into the next home. The $2.1 million will not all go to housing, and if it does, it'll be public housing. That's federal dollars that income is right there. We have to get approval. They do that in some areas. We've never done that. What we did was use it on the other side, which was MECHA, and we used defederalized money and non-for-profit money.
Ms. Orange, you have any questions?
We do have Attorney Harris here that is Housing Authority's attorney, and he can answer anything else that you have.
Ms. Orange?
Yes.
Do you have any questions?
Attorney Harris is going to explain it.
I'm sorry, was there another question? I just wanted to help clarify.
No, I just wanted to make sure that, the people listening don't get the perception that they're going to, the developers are going to buy the land for $2.1 million and then give it, the housing authority would take and then put $2.1 million worth of housing in zone 2 and 3. If that is not the case.
That's correct. Again, this is
I
Jewel
didn't
Harris.
get that out of that, but I just want to make sure that that's not the case.
You didn't get it because that wasn't the explanation. You're right. This is Jewel Harris. I'm the attorney for the East Chicago Housing Authority. The $2.1 million is the purchase price. Obviously, the Housing Authority's mission is affordable housing. Its affiliate, which is MECHA, also has a mission of furthering affordable housing within the city. So to the extent that the $2.1 million will go towards housing in the city of East Chicago, that's true, that will occur, but the $2.1 million is not going directly towards construction of new homes in zones 2 and 3. That I just want to make sure that that's clear.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Attorney Harris.
Excuse me, Mr. President?
Yes.
Yeah, I'd just like to follow up with the petitions that I have. I have over 35 to 40, maybe 50 signed petitions that will be in the packet. I just want to give you the number.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Hill.
You're welcome.
Mr. Rassifer, you have any questions?
No questions, President.
Mr. Perez?
No questions.
Mr. Monroe?
No, Mr. President.
Mr. Hill, since you're there at the council chambers, do we have any public expressions there?
Yes, I think we have one. Attorney Randolph, are you just here to listen?
Speak.
Yeah, 3 minutes.
Evening, council members. I appreciate this opportunity. You only got 3 minutes. There's a lot of questions I've got, but I want to indicate something to the council at this point in time. My obvious concern is that verification and notification to the residents there. I am a product of that area, and that's where I was raised at, and that's where my family was raised at, including my brothers and everybody else. So I'm concerned concerning notification to the community, whether or not the community had any input concerning the support of this project and what the position is. I heard that Representative Councilman Hill had this petition. Is it a petition that he prepared, or is it a petition that the people in the residence put together in support or in opposition to it? I don't know. I'd like to find out more about the program period. I am aware of some basic fundamental facts, which I kind of disagree with based upon some of the things I've heard. The obvious thing I'm aware of is that EPA had an option, and they've had experience throughout the entire country concerning Superfund sites. One of the options is that they may present it to a community that has lead contamination issue or arsenic contamination issue. Is the kind of cleanup you want. Do you want cleanup residential, or do you want cleanup for industrial period? Because there's different depth and expense associated with each one. I'm not certain that the community, the people within Zone 1, which is the West Calumet area, was given that opportunity, first of all. But I do know that there is an option that's presented to them, and there is no unilateral way to immediately do it as a remediation for a project. So I would like to be able to, this time, to be able to get verification of notification concerning the community in that area, because, you know, that's where my mom and everybody else was from, that area, as well as the input. I understand they met with some community members there as well. I'm not certain they met with the CAG group. CAG group is a local membership of residents within that community, which is homeowners and renters, who got involved based upon the avenue that was made available to them by the EPA. I also know that the HUD's involved, and at this point in time, HUD was only role was playing was terms of cost of relocating the individuals from the area as well. There is some issues I've got, or questions I've got concerning the residents there. Even though there's an estimation of 1,200, I believe it was close to 2,000 people were affected. Of the 1,200, I think there's residential homes that does not include the total number of kids that's involved. The other issue I've got is right next door to that, on the north side of that, is Carrigosh Grade School, which has been there for a number of years. So apparently at some point in time, there is no issue concerning what's going to happen to that property. I know the school corporation has to be brought into the play at some point in time.
Mr. President, a rule of law is 3 minutes are here.
Yeah, I thank you, Mr. Councilman, but in any event, those are questions that I've got concerning the whole matter, and I've got some more beyond that, particularly concerning the property value issues. I've got a question concerning that, in terms of how it's going to affect the property values of the residents there as well. But in any event, I'll go ahead and yield the floor to whatever's the next agenda on that. But those are
Mr. Randolph, if you could address those questions to me, I'll make sure they get answered.
Thank you.
Mr. Hill, any other public comment there?
No, sir, Mr. President.
I'm offering anybody that's online now to do any public comment. Anybody that's online presently.
Hello, Mr. President. This is Pastor Sloss, the pastor of the First Baptist Church in East Chicago. And we have some letters that you'll be getting that were given to Mr. Hill. I not only represent the First Baptist Church, but I'm also the vice president of the Twin City Ministerial Alliance, of which several of the pastors are on the line even as we speak. We just want the council to know that we are certainly in support of this project. Whenever I come to these meetings, most of the time people start with, I was born and raised here in East Chicago. That's not my testimony. I was not born and raised here, but I've been here now 8.5 years, and I moved to East Chicago by choice. It's a great community, and I've seen a lot of development in East Chicago that I'm proud to be a part of. But it is certainly time for us to get some redevelopment here in Calumet. And so we want the council to know that we are certainly for this project. We're for the jobs, we're for the training, and we're looking forward to the rebuilding of Calumet. That's all I have. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Anybody else online for a public comment? This is your time. I don't know if somebody from the CAG is on. Anybody online from the CAG? Is there opportunity for public expression?
Yes.
Yes.
This
State
is
your name
Maritza,
and your address, please.
Maritza Lopez, 4928 Euclid Avenue, East Chicago, Indiana. I'm the chair of the CAG. The CAG was formed in actually in December of 2016, and that was by EPA. I just want to let you know the CAG is made up of residents of the whole Superfund site, and we've been in this from the beginning. We've been working actually with the city, as Carla had mentioned. This project, the stakeholders per EPA's book is the city, meaning the mayor's office, the council, Lonnie Randolph, our senator, our state representative, Ministers Alliance, Calumet Lives Matter, Community Strategy Group, the CAG, and the only ones that really were approached were the Ministers Alliance in this project. We were left out. We found out at the end. And here we've been dealing with the residents all along, and working with them with the whole Superfund site. The big factor here is the cleanup factor over there, because it will contaminate the residents in Zone 2. That's the first step before any project takes place. Because you need to make sure, this is sand and dunes here, and everything that's built is on sand and dunes. And as we need to make sure that the residents are not affected, because it blows and it goes northeast and it travels. So economic development needs to be on the backhoe. You need to take care of the health and safety of the residents first. We have been contaminated too long, for decades. We're affected neurologically, with cardio problems, cancer, and all that already. And you want to add on and not have a proper cleanup there? No, it doesn't work that way. And that's been our fight anyways all along. So we need the council to put us first, the residents that live here. And yes, our property value has dropped. My property value in my home dropped over $40,000. So you can't go citywide. And putting that there, we're talking adding noise pollution, diesel, adding on top of the vehicles. And you're already building a logistical company over here behind DuPont, on the DuPont site, Ashcroft, by East Calumet. Then we got the pet coke trains that are not monitored by the city because there is no law, and they're uncovered, and they're running by my house, which I got pictures, and down the tracks between Hughes and Kennedy Avenue.
Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. Hill. Is that 3 minutes, Mr. Hill?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. Anybody else?
Hi, this is Akeisha Daniels.
Yes, Ms. Daniels, go ahead.
I'm a lifelong resident, and I was one of those people born and raised in Calumet. I'm 43 years. I've lived in all three zones. My grandmother's been in the same residence since 1954. My biggest issue with them building this out there, she lives right across the street from the First Baptist Church. None of those residents have been asked that they want this built out there. They are the ones that live there, stay there. They don't visit on Sundays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays. They live there. They've been there through the good, the bad, and the ugly, and I feel like these residents should have been notified that you're trying to bring something into this area that is going to cause more diesel fumes, more traffic, and God knows who is going to be coming in and out of that area with those jobs. The Union Tank area is open. No one thought to purchase that land to use it towards building this. It's been open for years. So if the grounds on West Calumet was too contaminated, then why would you put buildings out there for people to live or work on? It's too contaminated for us to live, so it's too contaminated to work. My next question was for the people that's doing the building. Where are, how many properties have you all worked on that have this type of contamination? How far are you going down with cleaning this? And where are your air monitors for the people that are already out there messing around on those grounds that are so highly contaminated? because no one is telling the residents that that stuff could be blowing anywhere. EPA is not here retesting the homes or seeing about the people that live in the walking distance of that area. They have had people out there digging. They've had trucks. These people out there with no type of protective gear on, and these people are tracking that stuff in and out of West Calumet daily. So I would like to know, as a lifelong resident, what are they going to do about that before you start building anything? Where are the air monitors, and how long is it going to take for you to get some up like ASAP? Because I got an 87-year-old grandmother that lives right down the street. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Daniels. Anybody else with public comment? Anybody else?
Hi, yes. This is Thomas Frank.
Name and
Can you hear
address,
me?
please. Yes.
Yes, I'd like to chime in and back up Ritza Lopez's and Akeisha Daniels' point of view. I'm really offended by the Ministerial Alliance to train the community the way they have. What's happened in this process has gone over and around the community that is there guiding this project and the cleanup. And this whole economic development project is going completely around that. Now, let me just give you some real easy understanding. Right now, East Chicago, 80% of the land is zoned heavy industrial. We don't need more industrial. We have two of the most profitable and largest, most polluting industries in human history. BP, with the largest tar sands refinery in the country, with a $4.5 billion project, and ArcelorMittal with the largest integrated steel mill in the Western Hemisphere. If we can't survive as a community, housing, with those two cornerstones of the community, we don't need to start cannibalizing on more residential land. This is the third neighborhood in 2 decades that has been demolished because of industrial use and industrial projects. We know that the EPA presented us with alternative 4D to do a full cleanup. Then we would have land that is prepared and ready for housing. They obfuscated. The community was 100% behind a full cleanup. And once this project got on the docket, everything changed. This is everybody's being hoodwinked. This is corrupt and evil, what's going on here. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Any other public comment?
Yes, I'd like to give a public comment, please.
Yes, your name and address.
Of course. Hi, my name is Colin Parts. I'm a law student intern with the Abrams Environmental Law Clinic at the University of Chicago Law School, which has worked with members of... Sorry, someone muted me there. Should I begin?
Yeah, begin
Okay.
again. Mr. Hill, can you start over again, please? Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, you can start.
Okay, fantastic. I'm going to provide some clarification regarding the EPA's determinations and plans regarding remediation at the site and how that intersects with Indiana's building codes. And my comments are based upon looking at the EPA's record of decision amendment and looking at the Indiana building code. The first thing I want to talk about is a comment that was made during the meeting last Monday, May 11th, and it's regarding the 36-inch footing requirement. I want to clarify that the 36-inch footing requirement applies to both industrial and residential development. So whether it's residential housing or in Sorry, someone is muting me. May I proceed?
Yeah, go ahead, proceed.
Okay, can I reclaim some of that time?
Yeah, yes, you can.
Thank you. So the 36-inch footing requirement is imposed upon both residential housing and industrial warehousing of the type that would be built here. So industrial development faces the same obstacles regarding foundation excavation that residential development would already face. The Indiana code requires a minimum foundation depth of 36 inches, and the warehouse described in the developer's plan would be a Class 1 structure. The proposed warehouse would not be a Class 2 structure, and since it would be a Class 1 structure, it would need a minimum foundation depth of 36 inches. That excavation would go into the contaminated soil just as residential housing would, so this doesn't get you around the issue of digging down into contamination. Second point, rezoning leaves more contamination in the ground. Rezoning the site for light industrial use will leave more contamination in the ground. So if the city and the Common Council are truly concerned about the risks posed by contamination, they shouldn't be rezoning the site for industrial use. The EPA indicated that it chose modified alternative 4B, but it also recognized the possibility of choosing alternative 4A instead, depending upon the final use of the site. Alternative 4A will only remove the top 12 inches of soil. So if the EPA determines that the final use of the site is industrial, it will only implement alternative 4A and will only remove 12 inches of contaminated soil. And that brings me to my final point. Residential zoning would better preserve the resources of the city and the developers. If the city doesn't rezone the site, the city will receive a greater cleanup at no additional cost to the city, with only a slightly longer remediation timeline of just 2 additional months, which would allow for more possible uses afterwards. The EPA would dig down 24 inches. It would only take 2 more months, and if the EPA digs down deeper, there are more potential uses for the Zone 1 site in the future. You could potentially put an industrial site later, but putting an industrial site now totally closes off any other possible use for that Zone 1 site. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment out there? Any other public comment? This is your time to speak. Any other public comment? All right, not hearing none. Milton, if we could get EPA up here, you know, to answer some questions, I really appreciate that, because I think they're a missing piece to this puzzle, for me anyway. So if you could try to get a hold of them, Milton, I appreciate that.
Yes, I will reach out to you and keep the entire council apprised of my efforts.
All right. I want to thank Steve again for today doing the presentation, coming to the council chambers. We're under unprecedented times with this pandemic. I want to thank Councilman Hill for being present there at the council chambers. I want to thank everybody at the council chambers right now. I want to thank my council for being available today. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
The motion was by who? Who made the motion? Motion Monroe, second by Councilman Hill. Roll call.
Gonzalez,
Yes.
Francisci,
Yes.
Hill,
Yes.
Orange, Rancifer,
Yes.
Perez,
Yes.
Monroe, Garcia.
Yes. We'll see everybody on Monday's council meetings at 6 p.m.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Yeah.